But we were talking about something, the UN this week had a 17-point presentation, and they renewed what they called a 7-year covenant, Project 2030. And if they can impose these 17 things, then they will achieve the global domination that we need to sustain life. I'm going to translate all that nonsense and malarkey and all these words that they use that really don't exist, and they put them together in a configuration that sounds good, but it really means nothing except this. We're trying to get a world where the people who have the money, resources, and power is very small, and the people who spend their time on the plantation working as slaves to get our future secure is very big. I can tell you, each and every one of you in this room would be working on the plantation, not sitting in the power play. And so we were talking about that, and I think 7 years is pretty incredible. And there's 17 points. Basically, they went through Matthew chapter 24, and they started outlining in the specific order that Jesus went through the signs of his coming. They talked about famines and pestilences. They talked about hunger. They talked about earthquakes in diverse places. They talked about all of the things that Jesus said would precede him, wars and rumors of wars, and they went on and on. And those were their 17 points. And I asked Mac, I said, are they just playing with us? Like, is this really messing with us? Or do they really are they so arrogant that they believe that Christians are too stupid to know that they're quoting the Bible, telling us how they want to enslave and imprison us on this global minefield and this global plantation? Anyway, and so I think about it. The game's almost over. You know, the Bible talks about the covenant that they'll sign with Midian, Daniel, and Isaiah. And it says that when that day comes, the man of sin will arise. And for 7 years, Jacob's troubles. The world will face tribulation as has never been seen since the dawning of man. And so I think, as Benjamin Netanyahu and the crown prince of Saudi Arabia are talking about peace in the Middle East, you know, they said after the Abraham Accords, there were 4 nations that had signed peace with Israel, 4 Muslim nations. And now if Saudi Arabia signs, that makes 5, and they believe they could have 5 or 6 more. I think the math gets us to right about 10, the 10 nations that Daniel talks about. These are signs of the end, and now they're poking us with them, flashing them in neon signs. They have to tell us what's going to happen next because they're so arrogant that they think that we don't even believe our own gospel. I can tell you the day is coming close at hand. The treaties are being signed. Benjamin Netanyahu showed a map and he said, this is what it looks like now. This little tiny Israel surrounded by hostile Arab nations. And he flipped the map over and showed all this green around it. And he said, finally we'll say peace and safety in the Middle East. You know what the Bible says? When in Israel they cry peace and safety, then sudden destruction will come. Folks, we're coming to the end of all things. And if you don't believe me, consider this. You could leave this place and be run over by a car. You could be hit by a bus. Family members could die of cancer. This could be the end of all your things, whether it's the end of all things or not. So whether you think that I'm just lying to you about what the Bible says and what's going on in current events or not, just know tomorrow's not promised to anybody. In the book of James it says, life is a vapor. Here today, gone tomorrow. I used to think that that was ridiculous. You know, when you're Jude's age, when you're 8, time seems to go so slow. Oh my gosh, if this day could just get over. Now I get to the end of the day, and I think, what happened? And then we get to the end of the next year, and I think, Jude's not my little boy anymore. He's multiplied. They're now surrounding me. Somehow we went from one sweet little innocent boy to 4. And they get a little less sweet and a little less innocent as they go. Lord, time's moving too fast. Can you believe we're already at the end of September 2023? We've been at this 8 months, folks, since I got here. It seems like we just got started. I don't know where the 8 months went, but I thank God for each and every one of you. I can tell you time is coming to a close. You look back, Brother Dave Kretsch is 93 years old. I was talking to him one Wednesday night, and he said, Brother Nathan, enjoy it while it's in front of you. Because 93 years goes by in a snap. You snap your fingers and you look and it's gone. Your little girl's now taking care of you instead of you taking care of her. Life moves very quickly. And so what I want us to consider today is something called urgency. How should we live? How can we live a life that matters, knowing that tomorrow's not promised? Tomorrow is not promised. We could be at the end of all things, because you know not the day when your master is coming. If you knew, you would stay awake. Be watchful. All right? It was a few years ago that Kayla and I were doing our favorite thing, spending a week in Florida. Man, if time goes fast here, those weeks go by at warp speed. Like, oh, we just got here. I just made this 12-hour drive. My shoulder still hurts from holding the wheel. I already got to go home. Ugh. We were driving home, I think it was 2013 or 14. Probably some of you remember this little fad. And about every other car that we passed going through Georgia had these dumb letters written on the rear windshield or on the side window glass, YOLO. If you know me at all, you know that anagrams aren't my thing. I hate them in the corporate world. I don't, like, come on, just say what you mean and mean what you say. I don't need all that cutesy stuff. And so by about the 10th time I had seen that, I was like, has the world gotten dumber, honey, or am I just getting more cynical in my age? Yeah. I could call it old age. But I will tell you, 4 children start to get gray hair. You know, 2 years ago, I didn't have any of this gray hair. So I don't know if it was Lucy or Boone, but one of them accounted for a lot of this, you know. I'm going to trim it real short from now on so you can't see it, but it's gray. YOLO. I was like, oh my gosh, I can't. What kind of world do we live in? Can't you just write what you mean? Or, hey, I've got a novel concept. Don't write anything on your glass, right? Yep. Then you don't look like a moron passing me on the highway. Sorry. I was born 100 years old. Benjamin Button. Just always been cynical, always been a grouch. I live in a trash can, green like Oscar. So finally she's like, honey, do you even know what that means? I'm like, yeah, I know what that means. That's why I've been griping about it with every car that passes. And she goes, it's just one of those sayings that they pick up, you know, in the modern vernacular. You only live once. YOLO. YOLO, everybody, you only live once. So I can tell you that didn't make me feel better about it. It actually made me feel worse. I got more irritated. And she's like, I'm just going to sit in the back seat. I can't deal with it. Good thought process. Because I'm going to be grouchier than ever. Now, you gave me more fuel for my fire, more bullets for my gun. YOLO, you only live once. It offended my sensibilities because I heard the spirit behind it. Now, the first thing we have to know is, as a Christian, the idea of only living once runs totally contradictory to what we believe. This is not the only life. In fact, this isn't the best life we can live. So, listen, if I start espousing live your best life now, fire me. Go find someone that's telling you the truth. Because if you're living your best life now, that is an indictment on the life we're going to have in heaven, which I can only imagine. I can only begin to dream of what God has been designing for us. Since the foundation of the world, it is going to be a place so much more marvelous than this. And it's not just because the gravity is going to be different or they measure time differently. It's going to be because we're going to walk streets of gold alongside the master and creator of our universe. It's going to be perfection. No more sadness, no more sickness, no more shame, no more sin. That's a place I can't wait to be. And so to say you only live once, I don't abide that. Because I'm looking forward to the second life. Right? Hey, the day that the master comes calling, I want to be ready. All right, Lord, you said you got a mansion prepared for me in your Father's house. You know, I had never lived in a mansion, but I think I could get used to it. You got any butlers in that mansion? Because I'm going to get real lazy on you once I get down. But here's the other thing, and Peter lays it out better than I could. The spirit behind this YOLO ideology, when people go to their beaches and their spring break culture and all of that, what they're really saying is, we like a culture of drunkenness, debauchery, promiscuity, and danger. Those are the things that make us feel like we're alive. We want to live like there's no tomorrow, so we've got to go get everything wrapped up in it. And what I've never understood, and like I told you, I was born old. My dad told me when I was 5, boy, you're an old soul. Just an old grouch. You already complain about the times we live in. You ain't even lived them yet. the thing that bothers me about that is I don't understand it. I don't understand why rebelling against God makes us feel so alive, when in fact, the wages of sin are death. We've convinced the world that they have to go do all of these things and experience life before they can come to Christ. Here's the problem with that. Experiencing Christ is life. And all of those things are death. It would be like joining the military and saying if you weren't shot, you didn't have a mine blow up under your feet, you weren't stabbed in the back by Benedict Arnold, you didn't serve as a POW in a foreign country, you weren't tortured, they didn't try to get information out of you, that you really didn't serve in the military. You know, there's plenty of good career men who have their military honors all over their chest that never had any of those things happen to them. I can tell you most good people aren't going off thinking, I really hope I get shot, right? And yet that's how we live our life with this YOLO mentality. It's a mentality that I don't understand and it bothers me so much. And I can tell you that's not living your life with urgency. It's living on the edge. That's a death wish is what you're asking for. And that's not a life pleasing to the Father. And so you say, okay, Brother Nathan, if all of those things that the world tell us are the ways that we live, if you're telling us that's death, then how do we live? Right, last week I said the game was almost over, and I felt like I came just short, because I told you all the game plans of the world and all the strategies that they have to put us under thumb, but I don't think I said, this is how we should live with the game ending very soon on our behalf. So I want to go through that today, and I'm not going to reinvent the wheel. Peter tells us exactly how we should be living here in 1 Peter chapter 4, and so I'm just going to follow his lead because he walked with Jesus. He had the word revealed to him by Jesus. He walked on the water. He was at the Mountain of Transfiguration. He saw physically 5 loaves and 2 fish turn into food for thousands, right? So I would tell you, he really did live a life worth talking about. That's why we're talking about it 2,000 years later. So I think he would be a little better person than old Oscar the Grouch here to tell you how we ought to be living a life pleasing to the Father, how we can really live a life of urgency, how we can live a life that matters, knowing that tomorrow isn't promised to any of us. Okay? So, what's the first thing that Peter says here? Verse 7, he says, the end of all things is near. Therefore, be alert. It's funny, Jesus also said in Matthew chapter 24, be alert. The first way you can live a life that's pleasing to God, you can live a life that matters, a life worth talking about, is to be alert. There's a war raging all around us. And most people go about burying their head in the sand. And I can tell you it's actually worse in the church than it is in the world. The world is enlightened to it because they believe it. They believe the garbage about the Green New Deal and we've got to save Mother Earth. I can tell you Mother Earth doesn't exist. That's not a real person, right? Mother Earth is a concept that we've created to make you feel a certain type of way about the land that you live on. What is a tiny ball right here in the middle of hundreds of millions of galaxies coming from the imagination of God that he designed perfect. It is the only place where life is inhabitable in this universe that we understand, and he designed it for you and me. And so we shouldn't be afraid of how we live on the earth. We should have dominion over the earth like he told Adam. We should subdue it and make it work on our behalf. So what I'm telling you today is be alert. Stop hiding your head in the sand. Stop pretending that the wheel's not spinning. Stop pretending that the things are going well, because if you really look, if you begin to dig just a little bit, you'll see the enemies are at the gates. They're trying to take your freedom. They're trying to take your family. They're trying to take your faith. They're trying to take your children. That's right. In California, in these United States, they've passed a bill within the last month that if you don't affirm the mental illness in your child, if you let your 8-year-old tell you that they are now a girl and you don't affirm that and start calling them by their new name, guess what? Joe Biden said your children belong to us. The state's going to take them and raise them how they want. and they're going to put you in prison for improper pronouns. Improper pronouns. You know what they don't do in this country? They don't arrest illegal immigrants who come in and rape and murder American citizens. They don't make those people pay taxes. They don't keep any record of them. They have 10 times the freedom that you have, and they don't even pay into the system. They don't have a social contract called a Social Security card. They are not obligated in the way you are, and yet they have more rights and more freedoms than you'll ever have. You're not allowed to raise your children because the President of these United States says your children belong to him. Yeah. Well, I can tell you, I wouldn't trust him to babysit my kids. He might forget what room they're in. He might forget what house he's in. God knows he might forget what color paint's on the wall if he's staring at it. Yeah. And yet he says your children belong to him. That's nonsense. Be alert. Be alert. The political wheel is not for you. That is not going to save you. There is not a politician coming to rescue you from the evil of this world. The thief comes not to steal, kill, and to destroy, but I've come that you might have life more abundant. There is only one coming, and his name is Jesus Christ. So when a political figure shows up and says, I have all the answers, I can get us out of this, I can save you, run for your life. Run for your life. Be alert. They're lying to you. The Bible tells you they're coming. Don't trust it. Do not trust it. Don't vote for it. Don't go indoctrinate people about it. Forget about the Trump sign you put in your yard. Put the Jesus Christ 2023 sign in your yard, because he is the only salvation that is coming for you. Be alert. Have self-control. Pastor, you don't have self-control. You say all the most outlandish things. How are you going to tell us to have self-control? Just so this isn't me speaking, it's Peter. Remember, he had all the self-control of a man who tried to slice an ear off as they were taking Jesus to the cross, right? I think I relate with Peter some. I'm really more of a John. I like to, next week you'll have a Peter here. My buddy Cody's a Peter. I'm more of a John. I like to beat him to the tomb and then write about it so everybody who ever reads the gospel knows just a little bit faster than him, right? That's more my heart. Anyway, have self-control and be sober-minded. What does that really mean? It means guard yourself against all the things we talked about. Peter talked about the ways of the world, living in debauchery, lust, drunkenness, orgies, carousing, and detestable idolatry, right? Have self-control. Those are the temptations of the world. That is the marketing arm of the gates of hell. Trying to drag you down, trying to destroy your relationship with Christ, trying to prevent you from entering in through the gates of heaven, trying to, you know, they say misery loves company. Satan's just trying to get a little bit of company. And so he throws everything he can at you. You guys have heard the terms sex, drugs, and rock and roll, right? Hey, you hear me? I'm always espousing a little bit of rock and roll, right? I like music. What I don't like is living a life that's not worth living. What I don't like is doing things that are displeasing to the throne of God. What I don't like is selling death as though it's life. Don't buy into it. Exercise self-control. Be sober-minded. Tune the world out. Separate yourself from the ways of the world. Come out, my people. Come out and be ready, because I'm coming soon, and I'm coming to a bride who's worthy. Coming to a bride who's had though their sins were scarlet, I've washed them, and now they're white as snow. Jesus is looking for people who aren't caught up in debauchery and orgies and promiscuity and drunkenness and idolatry. He's looking for people who are living for him, who have tuned out those things. And so Peter goes on after he says, exercise self-control. Ignore those things. Listen, if you can't stay away from those things, if you turn on your TV and what you're drawn to are the things of this world, right? The lusts of the flesh. If that's what you hone in on, throw your TV in the garbage, right? Yeah. Brother Nathan, that's pretty harsh. Okay, well, Jesus said it this way. If your eye causes you to sin, cut it out. It's better to walk into the gates of heaven with one eye or blind than it is to walk into hell, right? If your hand causes you to sin, cut it off. We all have a button of temptation that causes us to do things that we don't want to do. Truthfully, I have things that cause me to start feeling a certain type of way. I have to get away from those things. Have self-control, be sober-minded, and begin to pray. Because if you have self-control, you can be sober-minded, then you can focus, you can have a heavenly perspective. One of the things as I was preparing this that came to me is how we all respond in crisis. Then the day that you went head on with a semi, right? I bet that day you weren't worried if the house was dirty anymore. You weren't worried about the things that, your little pet peeves that annoy you. The thought was, thank God I'm okay. I walked away from this. We only get perspective in crisis, and yet Jesus is saying, you're in a crisis. The end is near. The shaking has begun. The world is against you. The time is now. Stop acting like you're living in a picnic. You're in a war, and it's a war for your very soul, and it's not just your soul. It's the soul of your children, and it's the soul of your parents and your siblings and your aunts and your uncles and your neighbor and your grandparents. Their souls are at stake, so stop living like the world. Come out, my people, and start living a life that's pleasing to the King, and begin to pray, God, help me to be an instrument for your purpose. Help me to be called according to your purpose. Help me to live like I would live in a crisis, forgetting about all the garbage that doesn't matter. In 9/11, people weren't calling asking if the sink was running, right? As the towers were about to fall. The thoughts that were on their mind weren't on their new wardrobe, on their Xbox. It was on the people they cared desperately about. Tell them I love them. Tell them I'm okay. Tell them I'm going to see Jesus. Please live a life that matters, because I want to see you again someday. I don't want this to be the end of our story. If we would get to praying and have some self-control and be sober-minded, we wouldn't worry about all the things that don't matter. I was thinking last night as I was kind of working through this and talking to Caleb. Jude and I had an incredible morning yesterday morning. And I mean incredible. It was great. I don't know how we did this, but he and I ended up in Cooper Shea's room. We were the only two in there. I think we thought everybody was just going to join us. I'm sort of used to that, right? Like, if I go here, people just show up, and if I go there, people just show up. So that's my expectation. Only the ladies in my life are a little headstrong, so they show up somewhere else. Like, I'm working on them, y'all. Pray for them. Pray for them. But so it was just Jude and I. And for probably an hour, buddy, we just laid there laughing and joking, telling each other stories. Just great. It's like, I don't know that I've had a better hour in my life. And at the end of that hour, for some reason, a thought came across my mind, and I did what I do. I get a thought, and then I've got to search it out. So just a random thought caused me to pull out my phone, and I started searching for something. And he goes, Dad, what are you doing? And I said, just give me a minute, buddy. I just need a second. I've got to get this off my mind. And then I got into a quagmire, and I started looking for other things. And I looked up, and Jude was gone. He had gone to start doing something with Mom and his siblings and playing his Nintendo Switch. And that hour was over. We don't know about having self-control and being sober-minded. Pray that you cherish those moments. When your son just wants to have time with you. And don't waste them getting caught up in the things, the little rabbits that chase through your mind. Those things don't matter. That boy right there matters. I'm so sorry I lost that time. That was on me. He wanted it. And while we had it together, it was wonderful. But I got distracted. Anybody ever get distracted with the things of this earth? My hope is, as I grow in the Lord, that the things of earth grow strangely dim in the light of His glory and grace. You know, they say you've never seen a U-Haul pulling a hearse, right? Or a hearse pulling a U-Haul. You don't get to take the things of this world with you. You do get to take the people. We spend so much time on Netflix or Amazon. We spend so much time worrying about what we're going to wear, what we're going to eat, how we're going to look, how we're going to present ourselves, what's going on at school or what's going on at work. We waste all of our time and our good energy on that. And we forget about the people around us. We forget to spend that time. I can tell you, if your Netflix account is causing you to live a life in an opposite room of your family, do me a favor, cancel it today, right? If your mind drifts to corners and places that you don't want it to, if the lusts and passions that this world keeps marketing keep distracting you from your family, take the TV, take the magazine, whatever it is, and throw it in the garbage. Burn it. Get it out of there, because that's not a life worth living. That's not living urgency. That's not living with urgency. There was an Islamic family from Iran who moved to the United States back in 2018, I believe it was. And the husband was so happy. He was able to buy his own store, and he was living here, and he was making money, and he was profitable. And for the first time, he didn't feel the pressure. The pressure that if he named the name of Christ, they were going to come and arrest him, put him in jail for the rest of his life. Or make a public spectacle of him, decapitate him in the public square, or hang him up for people to see. You don't worship Jesus Christ in Iran, right? And after about 8 months, his wife went to him and she said, honey, I'm going back to Iran. And why would you do that? We finally have a life worth living here. And she says, no, we used to have a life worth living. We had a life dedicated to Bible study and spreading the gospel, and it was harder. It was much harder. But since we've been here, we're in a satanic sleep. We don't live a life of urgency or desperation. We've lost our first love. Isn't that what we talked about 2 weeks ago? I've got to go back to living, because what we're doing here isn't life, it's death. This is what Peter's talking about. There's a war raging around us, and we keep spending our time hiding from it. And what Jesus is saying is, go get into the game. So we're going to first keep watch. And then we're going to pray that we can have self-control and be sober-minded and focus on the things that matter. And then we're going to do the next three things that Peter tells us here, starting in verse 7. After he says, be alert of sober mind so that you may pray. Above all, here's a point. Love each other deeply and earnestly, because love covers a multitude of sins. You know, Colossians says that the whole universe is bound together by love. Jesus said it this way to John, a new commandment I give you, love each other deeply as I have loved you. You know the amazing thing about this church? I can tell you what sold my wife on Calvary Christian Fellowship Church Wickliffe. We tell each other we love each other as we leave. It's almost the same as we say to each other when we leave our house in the morning. That word isn't a scary word in this place. It is the DNA of who we are as people. And we mean it. I love you. I love you. I love you. I'm so happy for you and so thankful for you. And we prove it when there's people who normally would be a little bit embarrassed, don't like a spotlight shining on them, but they have a need. The whole church just stands up and goes to them. We don't make them come forward. And we lay hands on them and we pray with them so that we can have healing in our body. And when we have someone who was right there, feeling like life is a vapor, here today, gone tomorrow, not promised, we stop the order of service and we lay our hands on them and we pray. We take prayer requests not because it's our duty, because we want to love deeply and intensely and specifically. You know, Jesus Christ loves you so much that if you were the only person who ever existed, the cross was still enough. It was still worth it to him to die. If you were the only person who would ever inherit heaven. Look in the mirror and know that Jesus Christ loves me. And so it's my duty, it's my job description to live this life of love. Loving intensely means some things. Love means sacrificing. Did you know that? Any of you been married? You know that sometimes you bury a little bit of yourself because of your first love. I can tell you, I've missed a lot of Ohio State football games over the years because I knew my girl doesn't want to just sit and watch football all the time. I don't even know that she still understands quite what a first down is, but you know, maybe when we get to heaven, Lord will kind of explain the rules. It's not that complicated a game, just saying. You have to sacrifice. Love costs something. It costs a little bit of yourself, but in it, it is worth it. One of the things I didn't understand when we started having children, I said this to Caleb, and she was praying desperately. I didn't want to have another baby. I thought, I think you're insane. Anyway, we'll get you a doctor after. You can talk to them about all these crazy thoughts that you're having. No, and as she was praying, I said to her, honey, I have so much love in my heart for Jude. I just don't know that there's room to love like that again. I don't know that it's even possible for me to love like that again. And so God blessed us with Cooper, and I remember I was at a church and they said, how's Cooper Shea doing? And I said, she changed the world. She brought new light. I felt like the Grinch the day she was born. You know, you see the image of his heart expanding three sizes that day. It wasn't that I had to divide up the love that I already had. It's that supernaturally God increased the amount of love I could give. And so I just had more love in my life, and it was more satisfying and more fulfilling. And then Lucy came and my love grew even more. And now Boone's there and he looks at me and grins like, Dad, I know something you don't know. Like, buddy, I think there's a lot that Dad doesn't know. And he goes to grab my face, and it's like he opens his mouth like, I just want to, I don't know what he wants to do to me. I can't tell if it's good intention or bad intention. But it's like, I just stare at him. Last night I was staring at him. I laid him down, and he had been asleep, and he gets this, I don't know where he gets this scowl from. That couldn't be his dad. Couldn't be. But he's just scowling at me like, how dare you lay me down? And I was looking in those dark, like cold eyes. Like he looks like he's got two shiny pieces of charcoal in his eye sockets. And he's just staring at me. And you guys would not believe this about me, but a little tear ran down my cheek. And I thought about meeting this girl in this parking lot, Labor Day 2005. And I thought, God, you had plans for that boy's life before I ever met that girl. That's how personally you love. And as we grow this church, you know, there are people who, you know, who espouse, we live in a small community because we don't like big things. Like we kind of like to be left alone. Nice to have a few cornfields between us and the neighbors, right? I'm so sorry. I'm not going to put a limit on how many people I want here. I don't care if we have to figure out a configuration where we hang seats from the ceiling to get them in. My love's going to grow with every person who joins this church and this congregation. Because the Great Commission didn't stop when we get to 70 people. Right? Going to all the world, baptizing them in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, making them a part of our family. Our sign means what it says. Radical love, real family, full gospel. I want you to be a part of my family because I like the feeling when my love grows. Right? I like giving my love to other people and then it comes back. Even the people that can't stand me. There are those people. Don't act like you don't know that. I know I talk a lot. I say crazy things. It's okay. Even those people, man, I love them. I love them like I love a person who's in a burning building. I love them enough to think I got to get in there and get them out. And even if they're mad at me and they never speak to me again, their life is more important than whatever we have between us. And I love them. And when I walk the streets and I go in the stores and I sit at the restaurants, the people I see, man, I hope they know Jesus. How can I show them a little bit of Jesus? How can I show them the love of Christ while I'm sitting here? If it's a little thank you so much for your service, I pray that God bless you. Right? If it's, hey, it's Thanksgiving, and I bet, Lord, I bet that's a person who could use a little bit extra. Let me tip beyond my 25% this time, right? To make sure that they know that someone out there sees them. God personally loved you. He personally designed you. He personally thought of you from the foundation of the world. And so when you see people, love means loving personally, individually. And you're never going to run out of love. Keep giving it away and your love's just going to grow. And you know how you know you're alive? Because that love that's in your heart makes you feel. When I was 13 years old, my parents divorced and my mom and I moved to Michigan. And I only got to see my dad for a week at Christmas, and I got to see him for 2 weeks in the summer. And I remember I was at the airport, Barkley Airport, and I looked at him and I said, Dad, why do I have to go? This isn't fair. And I'd never seen my dad cry. Now he cries at everything. I mean, commercials, like, I can't believe it. Oh my gosh, get over it. Anyway, sorry. But I saw him cry for the first time, and he said, son, that broken-hearted feeling is a result of the greatest gift God ever gave us. If we didn't have love, this wouldn't matter. Folks, living means loving. Give your love away. Give it to people who don't deserve it. Sacrifice. Bury yourself. Go love like Christ loved individually. That's what living a life that matters means, is to have love. We get it? You want me to go back into all you need is love? Will we sing it again? We got it. Okay. Moving on. Second point. Peter says, offer hospitality. When we started Wednesday nights here, I thought we've got to have our own thing, right? We can't do it like everybody else does it. We're just going to be everybody else. You guys know churches don't really differentiate. They think just having a different pastor or a different colored carpet makes them different than the church down the street. And I'm of a totally opposite opinion. If I want people who've never been into church to come into church, I got to offer them something a little bit different. They already know what the church is offering and marketing, right? We got to market something just a little bit different. So on our Wednesday nights, we decided to start making a meal. And man, we eat. It's good. Y'all feed me when I sit down to eat. I get yelled at every Wednesday. Pastor, sit down and get something to eat. I'm like, okay. I like to talk. Even more than I like to eat. But you all provide the meal. I went to Shane after about 6 weeks when I was like, we're cooking for like 40 people now. Like, we're going to have to supplement this as a church. We're going to have to give back to people. He's like, I totally agree. I don't know how we're going to afford it. We still haven't done that. And yet you guys, without anyone asking, every Wednesday someone goes and erases what we had this week and writes what we're having next week on the board. The food just keeps showing up. And I've not heard a single person saying, this is getting too expensive. I can't do this. Yet we have bacon and eggs and pancakes. There's always enough bacon that I can take it home with me. Right? We've had spaghetti and beef.